You are listening to The Weekly Wager on the iBet Networks with the Doctor and Uncle B. How you doing, Uncle?
What's going on?
I'll tell you, it is these games, this COVID stuff, the game last night. So let's recap. We're doing this on Friday, the 17th. We had the awesome viewing game. I mean, it was a fantastic game last night, the San Diego-Kansas City game. And I looked at the line, and I saw it, and to me, the first thing I got was I was like, this is a tough game. I literally, I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, Kansas City -3 on the road. San Diego, great team, very competitive. There's some question marks about the calls that they made in that game, going for the 4th and 1s that didn't work out. And then you have Mahomes coming back, and you have another very strange ending where if you're sitting there with the San Diego plus the 3, or maybe you got 3.5, you're thinking, okay, I'm good. And then it was just like last week where we had 2 games go to overtime that both were ended with touchdowns. And I have to tell you, Uncle B, I got to tell you, I got very lucky last weekend. I had both of those teams. Last weekend was I'm sure Vegas got destroyed. I bet the better was happy because the better is laying the favorite. I think the favorite was 11-3 last weekend.
Yeah, one of the stats that we're seeing is pretty much if the favorite wins the game, they cover the spread at a very high clip right now. I don't know the exact number, but it's upwards of 80%. If the favorite wins the game outright, they're covering the spread. Yeah,
in a game, the game that I liked last week when we talked about it is I really liked Arizona on Monday against the Rams. But, heading into that game, and I called, my guy that I talked to, and I talked about the game, and I said, hey, so heading into this one, he goes, yeah, so many favorites won. He goes, I think it was, at that point, I think it was 11-2 on favorites. And then going into that game, then the dog came through with the Rams winning. But I thought that game, that changed my opinion in betting that weekend. Because if I was thinking, sometimes we talk about how Vegas really needs something, and it seemed like Vegas really needed that one. And so that's what we got in that game. But that, to me, that was another tough game. But then you look at this game, the same thing, and I'm thinking, okay, Kansas City. So I ended up taking Kansas City -3 only because, again, I was talking to my guy, and he said to me, he goes, well, you know what this seems like? It seems like San Diego won the first one. So Kansas City probably gets the second one, and in one of those tough divisional games like we talk about all the time.
Yeah, it was up for debate. There was opinion about it. Some of what I looked at, I thought for sure that it seemed to me that the money was on Kansas City and that they were holding on the 3. But I did get some opinions that felt that there was starting to be public money load up on San Diego as it started getting towards game time. And I just think, in the end, they're doing such a great job. We've got a home dog in division on a Thursday night. They compete the entire game, which I don't know that I'm agreeing with going on these 4th downs. I think it's these coaches that go for it on 4th down, if they don't get it, they put themselves in a tough spot and they end up with a loss. And I know as we were watching that game, I kept telling myself, you can't just keep giving this ball back to Mahomes and expect to stay in this thing. It's not going to happen that way. And sure enough, he got her done.
And they're a unique team too. So for somebody like Kansas City, getting the ball deep in someone's territory, that's a half a play for them. I mean, that's one play for them. I mean, they literally reset the field position so quickly. There's some teams where you can see a field position decision like that might make more sense. A lot of these ground and pound teams that are out there. But for somebody like Kansas City, Mahomes does that in like 2 or 3 plays. So I don't know if getting the ball at the opposing team's 1 is a big deal to Kansas City.
I think some of the positives that came out of that game is that the quarterback for San Diego, he's going to learn a tremendous amount from a game like that. He's going to develop.
Herbert's what a young stud that guy is. He looks like a great. What a great matchup of 2 of the greatest, probably future quarterbacks. So that you're going to be able to watch those 2 guys for 10 years.
Well, one other thing that I thought was interesting at the end there, it seemed to me that San Diego's defense was gassed, and if you looked at Bosa, the defensive line, there was no rush there at the end on those last 2 plays, and it looked like they didn't even have the legs to tackle the tight end running down the field. So something to keep an eye on with conditioning, because it looked to me like San Diego ran out of gas last night.
That definitely could be the case. Hey, we got to update these numbers because you can see they dropped a lot. So dogs against the spread, only 52 now. So I mean that was higher, like 57 just a couple of weeks ago. So that's evening out for the season, which is kind of interesting.
Well, and it'll be interesting on how they look at that this week, because we have multiple examples where a team starts off as the favorite. As an example, Cleveland opened up at 5, and now we're seeing 3, 3.5, a 2 on the Raiders. Same thing with New England. New England opened as the favorite, 2.5. The numbers flipped the other way. So it'd be really interesting to see who's considered the favorite when the game goes off, and who the lines makers considered the favorite when they open these things up.
And let's talk about like the overlying theme this week. And the theme this week, besides injuries, which are always there, are now the kind of pandemic things that are going on with teams, where a lot of teams have gotten hit really hard. And Cleveland's one of those that we mentioned that's really has a COVID issue. Now we see, Washington has a ton of players now, including Heineke. Lots of guys. They have like 15, 20 guys on Washington that are going to be out. There's some teams that got hit. Giants got hit. We have the Dolphins that got hit. Obviously, the Rams got hit. Kansas City has a few guys that they already play. That's in the books that maybe they'll be ready by next week. Houston has some guys. Detroit has guys. Denver has guys. Cleveland has guys, and on and on. And Chicago has a ton of guys. I mean, there are tons of guys that are going to be out this week. And then you get to think, well, like, how do you want to bet these games? Because it gets so complicated. Do they have enough guys, or do you ignore it? What are you thinking, Uncle B, going into this?
I'm really apprehensive of what I'm looking at. And then I do feel as if we start to get public news. If somebody says, hey, Cleveland's got 7 players out on defense, it seems to me those teams cover.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't end up being what we expected, right?
Exactly. It's the opposite of the story. So, I mean, the one that you mentioned is we supposedly have Miami with some potential COVID issues, yet that line continues to run. It's at 9.5 now. There's a majority of the money is on the Jets, but yet Miami's spread is running. That makes me very apprehensive, makes me think that Miami is a strong play.
Now, let's check in. So I keep looking first at the weather. I'm not seeing any noticeably bad weather. The only game that might get hit, and we do get into our Saturday schedule this weekend. We have a couple good games on Saturday. We have the Raiders and Browns, and then we have the Patriots and the Colts both playing. There is the only weather I'm seeing that's really dramatic in this weekend is there could be some rain at the Raiders-Cleveland game, and that's what I'm seeing. But other than that, we're not getting any big snow games, nothing icy, mild temperatures really in the Midwest and the East. So nothing too dramatic, and the rest of the games are in domes. So we're not going to have big weather to worry about in this week's game. So that's not something we really can put any faith in our wager. It's not going to change anything. So what are you looking at? Let's look at, you want to do the Saturday games first? Because we have some good, Saturday games are interesting. Now, we have not been lucky with the Raiders.
Well, we don't have to worry about that, because as you and I were talking, it just popped up. That game's been postponed.
Oh, that actually is postponed. Now, when are they going to play that game? Are they going to play it during the week?
It just now popped up postponed. So we'll have to find out when they're going to do that. So as of now, there's only one game tomorrow, New England, Indy.
That game, want to start out with that, because that's a pretty nice piece of work right there. I think that's one of the more interesting games. New England, too, is a team I'm not seeing, if I haven't heard, and a lot of these things, you're going to have to be to the minute on these things. New England only has 2 guys that I see that are really in the COVID protocol, Dalton Keene, J.J. Taylor. Otherwise than that, Indy pretty much the same, does not have a lot of COVID issues going in. They have Zaire Franklin, who's a linebacker, but they're mostly healthy. So we should get a good look at these 2 teams in terms of just normal health, and of course, the other injuries that always go on in the NFL. But they're not getting ravaged by COVID this week. Yeah,
very interesting game. Probably the best matchup of the week. Important for both teams. But what I find really interesting is they opened this game with New England favored at 2.5, and it quickly went into Indianapolis's favor. So that's sharp money. That's betting Indianapolis to move that number like that.
I agree. That's a big move. That's 5-5.
That's a big move.
Yeah.
That's a big move. And you've got New England, who's covered 7 straight. And the public money's going to be on them. They're not going to trust this move on Indianapolis. So This is something that I learned a long time ago. It's very, very difficult to do. But that line move says Indianapolis. And if you think about it, in my opinion, it would be pretty difficult, let's say, to put $100 down on Indianapolis. You just kind of feel like you're betting a loser. And
Right.
that's an indication that you got a pretty good bet there. That line movement says Indy all the way. But, New England's covered. That's a Super Bowl team that continues to cover. And
Well, here's the other thing I like about them too, because you don't see this a lot. They're 6-0 on the road this year.
yeah,
I mean, that's and here's the other thing. Let's go into the coaching thing, right? Those are the things we look at. We always want to bet good coaches, good quarterbacks, good systems, if you will. And you have New England, who the main thing that Indianapolis wants to do in this game and what they've been winning with is Taylor running that football. He's had an amazing season, having, one of the, just tremendous running back season. And you know that New England now, and that's the thing Belichick does. He said, I'm not letting you beat me, that one player. So it should be an interesting game because, that's pretty much how Belichick runs these games.
Yeah. And I think, if we could catch New England in a spot where we can beat them, we do have them on the second of a back-to-back roadie. And they're coming off of a divisional win that was a big one. It was nationally televised. And now they go back out on the road to face a decent Indianapolis Colts team that can run the football. I believe that's the only way to beat Bill Belichick is to run the football. And then when we take a look at the spread, some smart folks out there that bet Indianapolis, and that if they're going to move the line the way that they did, there's confidence in that bet. They're not going to move it against New England like that unless they believe somebody has some smart money on that. So I would have to, if I was guiding somebody on which way to go in that game, you have to go with the line movement in Indianapolis.
Okay, yeah, tough game though. I think it's a really interesting game. It's going to be a fun one to watch. Maybe one of those ones where you put a small wager on it just to keep it even more interesting.
Just to see if just to see if the lines makers are correct.
Yeah, they are. This is like I sometimes talk about this with, in my stock show, and I talk about it as RSI, where you have like relative strength. And there seems to be now, maybe the move is so great in New England now that it's a little overdone, and maybe it's time for a little bit of a correction, sort of like stocks do. And I kind of feel like that is one way to look at some of these teams, and maybe they've gone too far too fast. And so if
they don't get them here, I don't know where they're going to get them. This is the chance they have to drop one here. So I agree. I agree with that line movement. And then the other one, there's two teams that are considered good football teams of recent, in opinions by those that really follow this stuff, and they're both at home this week, and we instantly saw line moves on both of them, and that's Miami and Denver. If we look at those opening lines, I'm a little disappointed to hear we've got these COVID issues, because I felt that the line move for Denver was a very strong indication for Denver. All the money's going to be on Burrow. And then Miami at home, we saw instant line movement off of the 7. They're now upwards of 9.5. That's a good football team that's coming off of a bye.
Well, and I think you're also looking at, and when we look at Miami, right, let's take a look at that. They do have some COVID problems, right? So they have, Waddle, Lindsey, running back, and Gaskin. But it says he's going to be activated, so we'll see what happens with that one. But Miami, and is this so much a bet and a confidence that the Jets suck? Because the movement has really been, the Jets 3-10, 3-10 against the spread, 1-4-0 on the road against the spread, 1-4 on the road. Not a good road team. Miami maybe just wins this game like a 17-3 or something, really just a control game. Not a blowout, but maybe the Jets, the feeling is the Jets aren't going to score much. I mean, the over-under in this is pretty light. It opened at 43 down to 41. So I think that what they're looking at here, this is like a 20-10 or a 27 game or something.
Sure. Yeah. I think, there was some expectations. Some folks felt that Miami could have a decent year, and they have that quarterback. They have been playing well of recent, and I knew I was going to see that line move on Miami, and it did. So even if they had COVID issues, they're not backing up. They're at 9.5. They're not backing that number up right now.
Yeah, that's a good game. So let's dive in a little bit more to the Denver game we talked about, and what we're seeing there. And what's most interesting to that in that game to you?
Well, the fact that I've been eyeballing Denver, I know that they're a good football team. They've played some really good football. And when I saw the line open, Cincinnati -3, what I wanted to see was movement quickly in Denver's direction, and we did very quickly. And so when I'm looking at the money now, against the spread, it looks to me that the money is on Joe Burrow, and they're not trusting this line move with Denver. And it's a legitimate line move. Denver's a good football team.
Right. That is where the money is. So we're getting about 58% of the money on Cincinnati plus the 3. And I think this really is, you think about how well this team is, this Denver team with no quarterback and no quarterbacking to speak of at 7-6. It's a pretty good team. I mean, if these guys aren't, and again, we could talk about, your favorite guy, but if Aaron Rodgers does not stay in Green Bay, regardless of the Super Bowl run or whatever they do, then you'd have to think this is one of the teams. It still is got to be one of the favorites. I'd think with that team winning 7 games with no quarterback, it's, I think that's pretty amazing.
Certainly is.
So we're looking at this one now, and this one opened at Denver -1.5. Now Denver -3. And is this a conviction play for you? Because this to me seems like another very tough game. I would not be, the road. Bengals have been 4-2. They're 4-2 on the road this year. Denver used to have a commanding presence at home, but they're only 4-3 at home this year. So this game again, it's a tough game.
Yeah, it's kind of like betting against that other quarterback for the Chargers last night. Burrow is good. He competes. He'll keep you in a football game. They've already lost 2 in a row. So that makes it a little bit dicey. But as I mentioned, what I wanted to see is what the line did in this game. And for it to move in Denver's favor, the question I ask myself is why, right? We all know about Joe Burrow. Cincinnati's had some good games. It just leans far more public. We know Denver doesn't really have a quarterback. They haven't done anything that really makes folks real confident in Denver, but yet we're seeing the line move in their direction. Why? To me, Denver's the play.
Yeah, I see a lot of, by the way, neither of these teams really impacted greatly by COVID and all, but Denver does have some injuries on defense. Not sure at this date if these guys are going to play, but they do have several guys in their starting lineup that are questionable. That doesn't always mean anything. That could just be injury report, gamesmanship. But interesting game.
These are certainly games that we want to watch on Sunday, and we want to watch the line movement. So, as an example, if we were watching Denver, as we start to move towards game time, if Denver starts to back up, where the spread starts moving towards Cincinnati, that would cause me to pause. If the line sits where it is right now, moving up to game time, then Denver's a very strong play.
Now, here's a game that kind of interests me, only because of you look at it. So we have the short week. It's one great team and one kind of crappy team. But one team that's going to be a little bit seething, which is Arizona at Detroit. What do you see in this game? I'm surprised that this line has actually gone down, and now it's Detroit. Well, Detroit now they were getting 13.5, so some more money going on Detroit. What do you see in this game?
My first glance, I looked at the number and I saw how high it was, and I said, well, they're expecting this team to bounce back after a loss. They have blown teams out. If we look at their scores, they've taken care of business, and when they beat someone, they beat them pretty soundly. So I think this is an opportunity to protect themselves with double-digit number with Detroit at home, and that's just too much. And I certainly don't want to be playing around with Detroit, so I'd have to kick that game out.
Oh, that's out of there. I would just say that Detroit, though, they're not a team that there's nothing. I mean, they have been competitive in these games, but they're 1-5 overall. So I get it. This is a game, though. Do you think a team like Detroit, though, is packed up for the season?
It's really hard to tell. Somebody's liable to be motivated by somebody else on the team. They've got a resentment, and they've got the game circled. We just don't know. So some of these games, you just got to take them with a grain of salt. I certainly don't want to find myself on Sunday rooting for Detroit to make myself money.
So one of the heavier weighted games that I'm looking at where the money's going is this Carolina-Buffalo game. So right now I'm seeing 72% of the money going on Buffalo here. Buffalo minus 12 against Carolina. What are you thinking here? This is a snake pit Buffalo team. They just can't get out of their way.
Yeah, it opened at 9.5, and it has moved already 3 points. I even see 113 on the board. So they're fearful of Buffalo. Same thing as Arizona, potential bounce back game where they put it together and make themselves feel better in this playoff race. But that's an awful lot of points in that move. Another game I wouldn't be interested in. I'm seeing close to 80% of the money is on Buffalo.
Right. That's another game where we're not impacted greatly by COVID, by the way. So that's one that's, not going to have that problem. Yeah, it is. That's another tough game, and I agree. And you're going to get, it's a cold weather game. Not that Buffalo runs the ball, which is the strangest thing for a team in Buffalo to not run the ball at all. But you're going to get some. It's cold weather. I mean, it's going to be below freezing. We don't see any rain or snow in the forecast, but it's going to be a cold weather game. Is there something that stands out to you this week that's a great card? I think it's a tough card. I mean, I'm looking. Let me look at my team again. The Green Bay Baltimore game, right? So this, of course, this is another COVID game because we have Jackson, who's very iffy and maybe a game-time decision this week.
Yeah, have we gotten the final report? Is he going to go?
No, we don't know. He's literally going to be a game-time decision. I mean, I would put my money on that guy playing. I wouldn't bet that line thinking he's not going to play.
They're hanging that thing right at 6.5. Opened at 2, so that 6.5 is on the quarterback for Baltimore.
The thing is, if you watch the Green Bay game last Sunday night, and that was another one where I felt like I got lucky taking Green Bay in the cover because the Bears were covering the game the entire game until the end, and then Green Bay scored like 2 or 3 touchdowns. It seemed like in 5 minutes. So I mean, if you're watching that, talk about a bad beat. I felt like I got the best of the bad beats all last weekend. Like I never felt that lucky when I've bet on games, but that Green Bay game. Again, they didn't seemingly deserve to cover. Not that deserve matters, but they ended up covering. They're 11-2 against the spread this year. So talk about if you just bet Green Bay every week, you'd be doing fine.
You certainly would. At the end of the day, Green Bay, great quarterback, they end up covering. Kansas City, great quarterback, they end up covering.
That's right. Well, and you could, yeah, for sure. And one of the things here, though, that's tough about Baltimore, very good home team. They're 5-1 at home this year. They haven't been a great road-tested team, but they're 5-1 at home. Against the spread, they're barely 500. They're 8-5. I mean, this game is a close game, right? To me, I see this maybe being Green Bay with a field goal, and if it comes down to Mason Crosby, that's not going to be a good thing.
Well, you
are listening to the Weekly Wager, the NFL edition with the Doctor and Uncle B.
Who the house is, right?
How you doing, Doctor? We already had some of those Thursday games, so we got a short week this week. We had some interesting action. We had the Bears and the Lions.
We know the house is
and
need
the way I saw it, the Lions.
Do you have a
wagering?
Do you have a
push
number
for me?
The wagers on that one? I don't have.
Bears prevailing 16-14. We had an interesting
on the Green Bay Baltimore
Dallas Raiders game
like
where it ended up being a high-scoring game.
Yeah,
and then we had the Buffalo New Orleans game where Buffalo walked away pretty easy, covered by 18, and we were 2-0 in our picks. I think a pretty good showing for the Weekly Wager in the NFL on Thursday, the Thanksgiving Day special. We have some interesting games. What did you think of the Thursday games, Uncle B?
Three-set road trip.
Well, you know what? I hope Sunday plays out the
That's an
same way.
interesting way
I
to think about it.
I think it worked out exactly how we would have liked. Hey, the game in the morning that we talked about watching, how interesting, how good are they were at the point. I had heard somebody else had got 2 and got a push. Is that what happened? You got 2 on it and got a push?
I got a push. They were, Detroit came out, they started off really well, and I was looking, I bet that, look, I'm not interested in 2 teams that are kind of going in the direction they're going, but I thought for sure, maybe with the short week, and Detroit did come out and play well. They were competitive. Right? Chicago, Dallas, we're still waiting for that announcement to see if Nagy gets canned. But, Detroit fought pretty well. Again,
I think the one thing
in all
their
this
losses
this year, and it was
another
close
loss
for
the
them.
Giants,
So
how do they get their
ended up
points,
pushing
right?
there, but definitely hit on the Raiders and the Bills.
And that's my question mark. In a game like this, you're like, if Dallas gets up big early,
and some nice turkey,
they both have. So Barkley's got an ankle.
Let's talk about the games we're going to cover this weekend. A shorter schedule. Did we get any? And we're going to talk about, did we learn anything on the Bears? And I'm going to bring that up. We can bring it up later when we get to it.
What
are the Giants even going to do?
Tennessee, New England.
How do they move?
We're going to talk about Pittsburgh, Cincinnati.
And, put up points
Tampa
in this
Bay,
game.
Indy. Minnesota, San Francisco, LA Rams, and Green Bay. Very interesting to myself.
Same thing.
A lot of injury things we can talk about in that game. Cleveland at Baltimore. That's right. The last one we're going to cover. But what do you think? What do you think in this first game? This New England team, which is now being called the best team in the AFC right now. This New England team,
a little bit better than
they're favored by 7 against Tennessee at home.
Out of these big spreads,
that's a great matchup. Obviously,
on the numbers, not running, and
that's kind of how I've gone about handicapping this week. It was a little bit.
I saw a lot of
how I looked
from
at
Tom Brady,
the Raider Dallas game.
Downplaying.
It's interesting when we start listening to the stories that we discuss. The story seemed to be, and I heard it even again Thursday, that the Raiders had quit.
This is always one of those games.
Found it hard to believe that a 5-5 team in the NFL.
Sean Payton always
as we were watching the Detroit game, I said to myself, "This is why I put a money line bet in on the Raiders
on a weekly basis."
As I was watching two teams in the morning play combined, do not have
quite
5
Bill
wins
Belichick, but he's one of the great coaches.
Not great.
Hearing really a story that says that the Raiders have quit, and I said, "There's just no way that a 5-5 team in the NFL has quit." Right, so we go opposite of that, and we do pretty good. Now, obviously, the story is that New England's playing well, and then Tennessee is missing some pieces. So we got to keep the network story in mind. But what I'm looking at is the spread.
I think
let's talk about a couple of these.
My thought is right away.
You look at this
game,
a big factor in the NFL.
I'm going to take 11. I'm going to take the Saints.
Obviously,
the points. I mean, if I look at it and I had to bet it right now,
they're backup.
We talked about this too.
How AJ Brown is questionable.
When we talk about these games,
how
sometimes
Jones, really is
looking at the
games
this year.
Sometimes
they wake up
Sunday
morning
already, and then their defense, they have 5-6 guys
I'm thinking about
who are in their starting base 3-4 defense.
So it's kind of hard when we're
going
into
the
show.
We have New England
on a Friday or
has some minor injuries. They have some injuries at running back.
Games on Sunday.
Hunter Henry tight end problems with Geno Smith
because the line there's a lot of injuries on defense, especially with all this COVID.
Going into this much healthier.
So I'd say
so what do you think
is beware of what's going on if you're going to bet these games. You better
I'm
know
a firm believer that they're aware of all that information.
But this game I look
at, when they
send
this line out and start taking money on the game. And we see a game that opened at 2.5.
I really don't like laying
that is now all the way up to 7 with balanced money. And I think that people are starting to adjust a little bit.
What about that? This is a
strength line too, but
there's a bunch of things going on with this game with Seattle.
This is a tough game because if we had opportunity of betting this game, it was at 3. We missed the 3. We missed the 4. We missed the 6. Now we're playing at 7. I really like New England, Jeffrey, but if we show any type of discipline whatsoever, now that we're at 7 in this game, it's got to be a no play for me.
Well, you talked about it, and you talked about it yesterday on the show we did on Wednesday. You talked about the Raiders, where the Raiders became much more of a value play.
I'm not going to bet a couple of weeks, and
which is where I got on my wager in that game.
Our job is to kind of talk about all the games
doing that.
And say,
and I think again, this goes into what
we were talking about. Your good friend Lefty,
right?
Yeah, right.
And what Lefty looked for, and this is a reminder maybe, and kind of a lesson maybe to
the strong play that I would believe wholeheartedly
and I appreciate all the listeners,
is that
by
Bill
the way.
Belichick does
Keep
not
signing
lose
up on
this game
YouTube
at
if
home.
you're listening on YouTube.
Okay.
But what
Which
I would
means
say
we have to do
is,
one of two things. Either we have to get involved in a teaser,
and what you told me,
or some
and
sort of parlay on the money line,
show, you would always
or
tell
we
me
have to lay
he
a
would look
tremendous
for
amount
one
of
opportunity,
wood
maybe
to get $100 return,
right? And then he would.
And I'm not in the mood to do either one of those because I don't want to play around with a teaser this week. So I just kind of lay it out that way so that folks, it doesn't deter somebody from playing a strong team in New England at home.
Going into that, what would be the prescription?
They got offense, defense, they can run the ball. They're well coached.
How are the Giants going to score? And I like the
it's a
thesis
touchdown or less, potentially.
But I'll get theses are right until they're proven wrong.
They've been hot.
All I'm saying is I like the idea that I know this too.
That's a tough game, is what you're
saying. When you're traveling,
just
as an individual, like if you're traveling and you've been traveling for a week or 2 or 3 weeks.
Let's go to Uncle B. Let's look at. Might as well talk about. We talked about Belichick. Let's talk about his old quarterback.
That's difficult. So I agree with you. They're distracted.
At Indianapolis.
They probably have very little respect for the Giants.
6-5. Tampa Bay 7-3. Looked a little bit better, but it was the Giants last week. Not really sure they're home dogs here with Indy plus the 3. against Tampa Bay. What are you seeing here?
New England like that would pop. That would have popped right.
Well, Indianapolis.
I'll tell you, Uncle B, though, you're talking me into that game.
They're playing well.
I mean, I was dead set,
Same
but I think
these teams
the reason that I shifted my thought process on this one, because I would have
stop the run, but they can also run the ball and they're balanced.
Points, but the reason
so now we got
shifting
two teams matching up
is
against
kind of
each
like
other.
I think that
I feel as if Indianapolis is a good play, but they're coming off of such a high-scoring game at Buffalo.
We're New England.
They're playing against Tom Brady, who I don't like to go against. So
that's
a difficult game here. You're getting 3 home.
I'm looking at Tampa Bay's injury-wise. Tampa Bay has some injuries to some of these key players. I mean, they're Mike Evans questionable. Antonio Brown's out for this one. A couple starters on defense who are questionable. Pierre-Paul, Devin White, and Vitae. So you do have some questions on health for them. Indianapolis looks like a much healthier team now, getting back T.Y. Hilton into the fold. Much healthier going into this.
A great example to understand trust.
So is this one an avoid too, Uncle B, or what are you thinking here?
Well, you flip it on its ear.
I get tentative playing against somebody like Tom Brady.
Right, because he's one of those guys like the weasel,
in a row,
if you will. Aaron Rodgers, who if he gets the ball at the end of the game, he's going to have a chance in a close spread like that. Hard to bet against him. Is that what you're saying?
When you have so much money going on Dallas,
and I also I like what
it does make sense that both of these games.
I'm leery of
two kind of games that
blow out
for different reasons. I mean, obviously, New England and Indianapolis are two great teams.
But I will
have the idea,
Indianapolis,
or maybe the public sentiment that New England
I think they're a good enough team to win outright. And I'm getting 3 points at home. So that'll be one of the plays, Indy +3.
So what do you think about the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati Bengals matchup?
Is that
very good?
I think that's they're both interesting
plays. We have the 5-4
I'll tell you that
Steelers
Dallas, New York Giants one very interesting.
Cincinnati,
I guess what I wanted to say in terms of the betting,
neither of these teams are really dominant against the spread.
You don't have to be
Cincinnati
on
5-5 against the spread with Steelers 4-6.
Want to work hard
in terms of injuries.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh looks relatively healthy.
As many games as you
can.
Let's do it.
Let's throw them out.
Let's throw them out.
Not as much of a factor there. This is just one of those games that usually plays out pretty close.
Las Vegas, Cleveland, they already did that for us. Thank you.
On any given Sunday.
Yeah,
that's a tough game.
I like divisional matchups.
Arizona, Detroit, we talked about.
We're still getting more than a field goal with Pittsburgh.
Let's get rid of
I think public perception is more that Cincinnati is better than Pittsburgh. I think folks are not that high on Pittsburgh.
Arizona, Detroit.
What about the Washington-Philadelphia game?
As we get down into November, December,
so that
starts to fit into the mode of Pittsburgh. And I think you also notice as we dive into the numbers, we have some interesting statistics on Roethlisberger. He's from Ohio.
If you go back
and if you look at how he's done when he plays.
Well, the big move here was Heineke.
He has a tremendous record winning straight up, and he also has a tremendous record against the spread. I think he hasn't covered against the spread maybe once or twice out of 9 or 10 games in that.
2.5 to 5.
So he likes heading back for some home cooking is what you're telling me.
Now we're up into the
He likes it, and he's going to get more than 3 points here. We've got a defense. We've got a good head coach. We've got a veteran quarterback in a divisional game, and we're getting more than a field goal.
I'm seeing like 54%.
You might see in a little bit if that's one of
the
Uncle B's A, B's, or C's, but we'll figure that out a little bit later in the show. What are you thinking about the Minnesota and San Francisco game?
That's one where are we throwing that one out?
Pretty interesting. Came through strong against Green Bay. Offense looked excellent. Both of these teams relatively healthy. We'll have pretty much a full core, a little bit dinged up 49ers at the running back position, but most of their guys are healthy on both sides of the ball here in this game.
It's kind of an interesting game.
What are you seeing here?
The old divisional game.
Well, Minnesota's got a brutal schedule.
Chicago. What do you think of this game?
And they have
great Monday night matchup. We got a home dog
competing.
On Monday night.
But they've had two pretty much must-win situations. If you look at their recent schedule, and then I also see a team in San Francisco that needed to get healthy. They were missing a couple of things. They're well coached, and so if we take a short frame here,
this is a great game.
I think we're catching San Francisco on the upswing, something similar to what we've seen with New England, but New England's a couple of games more down the road on that. And then I really avoid teams that are coming out of a divisional matchup where they won as an underdog at home. So that was a big-time win for Minnesota. It's important division. They've won 2 big games. They go back out on the road to the West Coast, and they're playing a San Fran team that seems to be putting things together, and they will run it. They showed us that against the Rams. They will run it right down your throat and play physical. The money seems to be on Minnesota.
had
so
a very
Sam Friend at home there to cover that number.
Now that Jimmy G is healthy, they've had some weeks under there.
They were competing with Green
Bay
the whole way.
They have a lot of playmakers again. These guys are looking.
So that's an interesting
last
game on Monday night.
Looking like a
very
good
good several
team.
guys.
They've had some several guys that the record could be a little bit better.
So that's one thing that I still think,
another divisional game.
I don't know if it matters in this game. I think that
another kind
of
tough
moving heavily towards
last week we had the late news on Lamar Jackson coming out of that game, and that definitely could.
I'd take Chicago in that
pretty
game
quickly, but we have Cleveland. Who has?
I like the way that Fields is playing.
Mayfield's not very
healthy. I think Fields is getting better every week, but he's playing through it. He's getting them.
They have
in more competitive situations where they're.
This is kind of similar comment that you get that. Sometimes you get that. Right? It looked as if maybe the Raiders just needed to play in a away game and get out of Vegas
because their team is not. I don't know. I'm not sure that they have the right, offensive coordinator coach
on divisional matchups
working there. But I'll tell you, it does feel like they're starting to tip the scales with this quarterback.
Here's another one,
and he can make. He's not Mahomes.
We have a divisional team that's been getting beat.
I see a big play from him.
Their big brother here,
where he's getting better.
Cleveland is
and then what you get, what you start to get on the team when a guy does this, you start to get the belief
beat up by the public.
Defense plays better,
and
the offensive line plays better. As the quarterbacks play better, the offensive line plays better. And then the running game's better.
I don't want to see Baker Mayfield.
And they have a lot of talented players on that Bears team, actually. They're just not. It's just not all
a downgrade, so I may get a point
in
my favor. And at the end of the day, Baltimore comes down to their quarterback.
One thing I do want to keep on the forefront of my mind.
As we look at Baltimore's scores and we look back on their games, how many games has Lamar won for them? And how close are those games? Look, I can go through them right now.
They're super competitive and super close most of their games.
We're talking about when he ran over, was it Pittsburgh?
Him to do it every time.
I would certainly want to take a look at Chicago's run defense.
He's like Superman for that team.
Definitely interesting game.
And it's darn near every other game.
We got to throw a couple more out here.
You see 17-19, then the next week 23-7. Then you see a 25-31, then 34-6. Then you see a 34-31, then 10-22, then a 16-13.
Oh no, they played a lot of close games for sure.
2.5,
and then Cleveland can run the football and they like to play a physical game.
I'm wondering if
we also look at the angle, I just don't feel as if Cleveland's being painted very pretty in the network news right now.
And again, you have two great coaches
similar
in this
to the Raiders in that
game.
spot, right? They weren't painted real pretty in Thursday's pre-games and when they're talking about them being done. And we're going to get the same story in Chicago. So you look for a group of men to show up, get some points in a divisional game where they know someone well, and get ready for a fist fight.
I find it hard to believe that money is going on Pittsburgh.
Hey, most of the money on this game right now is trending.
Yeah, I'm seeing more of the money on Tennessee right now. I have a feeling there's something with Tomlin this year is a little bit different. It feels a little bit off.
Absolutely.
There were some rumors
exactly
about
what we want.
Maybe going to a college job.
Last one we're going to cover.
He's great in his interviews. He's such a hard ass.
My team with the Weasel.
I'm wondering if
Rams at Green Bay.
And
I haven't seen this in a long time. Green Bay getting 1 point.
They were talking about his maturity level is
and
not
they are against the spread.
It seems like this would be the time if he was going to go away. He might go away. It just something doesn't feel right.
They're 9-2 against the spread this year. This has been a team that's been covering. Where you have a Rams team that's 4-6 against the spread, 7-3. Last 10, 7-3 against the spread. So 4-6 against the spread last 3. But Green Bay getting a point at home probably because of the Rodgers, which is not a COVID toe. He's not even listed as a designation on the injury report, though we know he's got some
going into the draft, and there's not a whole lot.
We also have Aaron Jones potentially coming back, and you see that Dillon may be great, but I think the strength of that running game is when they have the versatility of both backs. The speed of Aaron Jones,
another team that's gotten
power of Dillon. That's a pretty damn good backfield. Probably one of the best
possibly
in the NFL.
As a suitor.
And then you have the Rams, fairly healthy, but offensively, where they're going, this team does not look great. In recent weeks, they're up, they're down.
No,
I think that at the beginning of the season, if you took the first 4 or 5 weeks,
I don't know.
The Rams is one of the
Super Bowl favorites. First off, do you think any of the things that Aaron Rodgers has done in the last year make any sense?
Same picture. So what are you seeing in this game?
Well, I only pay attention
I have my own ideas, but
I'm just saying
it's certainly going to be a great game. 1:25 start in the afternoon for the Pacific Coasters here. But a great game. This is a big game for Green Bay because 8-4 changes a lot of things around there.
Yeah, it's so easy for him. He knows the plays, and he's gotten better at.
So what do you see here, Uncle B?
He's gotten better at the way he uses his offensive line.
I did Harbaugh. It kind of draws me into one direction, and I never liked that. Right. So if you look at the spread, ultimately what you're telling me when they drop this number
Well, that is a very interesting game, and that's going to be
that Aaron Rodgers can lose this game at home. And I find that really hard to believe. Now is where we come into a dilemma. Anytime I find myself in a situation where I don't want to believe a number,
and then
that's when we need to pause,
good matchup,
take a step back, and say, okay, what's going on here, right? Because of everything that you just said, dead on. I cannot disagree whatsoever. Right?
What are you thinking?
So why in the world is someone telling me that Rodgers has a 50% shot on losing this game? And on top of that, from the opening line, they've moved the Rams.
You and I were texting back and forth on Sunday.
And let's remember, this is in LA.
And I sent
so here, just let me set up some things, because you have to start talking about it now, because we're into almost December.
We're making
so you got to talk about
wager
weather.
Picks on Wednesday.
This is an LA team, and we talked about that the last couple of weeks in the college games.
With the NFL,
pros are a little different. The kids are, it's different, but it's the same thing. You have an LA team that's used to practicing outside, 75, 80-degree weather. They're going to go to Green Bay, where now we're sub-freezing. Going to be 34 at game time, but you know how things can change. Any place in the Midwest, I lived in the Midwest for years, the weather changes on a dime, and we might get some snow on Saturday, the day before the game. And all I can tell you is when opposing teams go in there, the Packers have a knack for knowing how the field's going to play, and the opposing teams can sometimes be stifled. I remember a game, I want to go back like 30 years ago when Barry Sanders played the Green Bay Packers in a playoff game, and Sanders rushed for like -6 rushing yards, because I don't know if they iced the field, but it sure seemed like it. So I think there's some advantages here that underlie the actual players on the field. Definitely the home field advantage. Green Bay covering regularly at home, one of the best home field advantages in
that definitely does happen.
So what do you think? You think the pick is in on the Packers
are using this as like a guide for our listeners.
I can't get past
and I think
spread.
That it's been great.
I can't disagree
with
everything
what you can do is you're not going to always,
and based on the story that
those tout services are always like, this is my game of the year, this is my game of the year.
Green Bay should be favored by at least a field goal or more, and they're not.
I think this is like a guide for people to understand maybe
if there's no word of
what we're doing,
or how we're thinking about
again,
Rodgers poking
rather than we're just a bunch of guys on the NFL Network shows or NFL just picking games randomly, because they're going to pick. I'll tell you, they're going to pick most of the ones that
he really just had a sprained foot, I guess.
Very rarely.
I have a sprain, and I want to tell you this from personal experience. I have a sprained toe.
So at least having a thought process to why we're thinking about the game a certain way, I think that was very helpful.
They can do a lot of different things with shoes.
Yeah,
I don't
like
think this line's right.
That way,
we'll see on Sunday. But the pick in for me, I'm certainly on the Packers on this one, and probably heavy.
Eyeballing going into
all right, I'm going to trust you because you're a Packers fan, and you know
I'm looking to wager on.
I can't,
as long as everything
budge. I'm going to tell you
we don't have any issues.
So hey, let's break this down. Let's focus on the
let's talk about
it.
We kind of we talked about it already.
In order of the
Saturday game. We talked about New England and Indianapolis. We are thinking here that the big money move here is the line movement going towards Indianapolis makes them the choice we want to consider.
I'm going to shift gears.
Correct.
I'll go the other way. So I just have to trust Bill Belichick.
And that's what I think. Let me play our music
here. In this game, this line's telling me that shark money.
But that game is very interesting to me. I think we made some great points on that one. Now the next
one
I'm
going to go with the smart
Dallas,
money
New York
that's moved this thing.
Now your feeling here, and this is going back to your thesis on what you learned from left
play because of the
is this would be a place where you look for a team to maybe a favorite here
try to hunt down that spread.
So they're on the road again.
If you're in one of those states with the
divisional
gambling where you can go draft
3 games
of the other
back to back on the road,
definitely can find that available potentially.
With no
you'll see if you look at lines nowadays, you'll see several different lines from different services on some of the lines.
So Giants getting 10.5 here right now.
You just
was 11.5, getting 10.5
options.
The play here is take the points.
New England's the first pick, a C game for Uncle B. What do you
think?
Yeah, that's the target.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we put New England
looking at
with Indianapolis and flip a coin? You can take either one of those two teams at home.
To eliminate all the negatives.
Would you put equal units on those those 2 games?
And trust
they're
the
both two good teams. They're at home. One of them we're getting a field goal. The other one we're expecting to win. So, if you want to be safe, those are 2 good home teams.
Travel and
well coached, balanced.
Okay.
And you're not getting crazy,
We're not saying that the Giants
those are good wagers, so
to speak. What we're saying is
now, if we want to get we're going to move up the scale here. Our B game,
11 points in this game.
Let's take.
I like it
as our B game.
Throughout, we know Las Vegas and Cleveland is off.
Cleveland Browns.
We also have Arizona and Detroit. We kind of threw that one out. This one, you couldn't get me to bet this game.
What you see is a close game here. Are you interested in that game at all? Jackson has to be the only reason why I'd be interested in it. And they win a lot of close battles. coming down to field goal. So the B game is the Cleveland game. Do you have any other B games, or we're going to go right to the A plays?
Go on.
Was very
I would line up the same thing as we did before with Pittsburgh.
They stayed committed. They played
same
hard
division,
the
same type of
idea. At
the
end of the day, we got
of what we're playing.
And you have coaching. The only thing I'd look at is the Jacksonville play with a new coach.
So those are two good.
That would be the only interest.
But
I don't want to bet this game. I mean, this is not save your money here.
Spot.
And then what do you have for your A games for this week? Okay, so when we talked about
the
process of elimination to you, New York Jets.
Why don't we do this?
Jets probably can't score. It's going to be a low-scoring game.
And in the same
we have a tendency here to look at.
We're going to take the Weasel
Miami, who's kind of
and hope he doesn't let us down. I'm telling you.
I've been trying to avoid
San Fran and Green Bay.
I like it. You heard it. Uncle B's picks are in, and I'll tell you, I like that pick. That's going to be that's a conviction pick for me. Is the Green Bay one? I also like the San Francisco pick. I think it's very interesting, especially taking into account what we said about Minnesota having a very tough divisional win, maybe ready for a little bit of a letdown. San Francisco playing well, on a Thanksgiving week, focus still on a real nice uptrend.
I'm going to move on.
And I think that's a good pick with San Francisco. You heard it. Those are the picks for the week in the NFL. The Doctor and Uncle B, the weekly wager. Hey, if you're listening,
next one we
watching on YouTube,
I can't remember if we threw this out or we're looking at it, which is Carolina Buffalo.
No, the next game I'm targeting is the Cincinnati-Denver game.
Okay, Cincinnati-Denver. What are you thinking in Cincinnati-Denver? You're thinking you'd like Denver at home?
I think Denver's a better team, and I don't think their quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, can do a decent job. And I think the fact that they laid this number and it moved the other direction, Denver's a very difficult team to beat at home. The only thing that makes me slightly apprehensive is that Cincinnati has a good quarterback and they've lost 2 in a row. So that's a hungry team. But I think Denver across the board is better. We have turnover issues with Cincinnati, and a big reason why they've lost their last 2 games. I think at this point in the season, I don't know how you correct a turnover issue. And so I'm gonna be targeting Denver. What I do not want to see is I don't want to see this line back up on Denver. I want to see Denver stay as the solid favor around 2.5, 2, 3 is a big number. And as long as we don't back up and it starts heading towards Cincinnati, then I'll be targeting Denver in the afternoon.
Interesting game here, but I'm not interested in this game to bet this game. Atlanta at San Francisco. Niners ran into some trouble last week, looking to rebound here at home against. I don't know really what to say about Atlanta. I don't follow them very much. Do you have any opinion on this game, Uncle B?
No, the only we talked a little bit about San Francisco's power rating is decent, and they have played some decent games, and so the numbers say that San Francisco is a decent team and that they can compete. And then we see the number that's laid here at 7.5, and it moved to 9.5. Nothing that I've seen out of Mr. Ryan in Atlanta gives me any encouragement to play that team. But this is just too big of a number. I just don't have any interest in playing around with it.
I agree with you on that one. Green Bay at Baltimore, I kind of talked about this. This is my team. I follow them closely. We don't know what's going to go on with Jackson. Very tricky space here. I think if Jackson, on game day, if you get the word that Jackson plays, what's this line with Jackson in it? Is it 4.5?
It looks like they want us. Well, we're seeing 7s now, so it was at 6.5, and now they're going to push the 7. So sounds to me like Lamar Jackson's been confirmed, or we wouldn't be seeing these 7s as we've been talking.
Yeah.
And then
what's the line in this one with Jackson playing? Is it 4?
I think yes, I believe 3.5, 4. Let's see here. Yep. So the correct number opened at 2.
Yeah.
Inside of a field goal.
Well, I mean, this is one I think, Green Bay is going to win this. I don't know if I'd bet this. Even as a fan, I wouldn't bet this. If there are any more news on Jackson, I would maybe look at it. Let's look at another one. Yeah, go on.
With Lamar Jackson in the game, lines makers are saying that they can compete. And so if he's not in, you get what you get.
Well, that's been the case. I mean, he makes them competitive. I mean, if you were going to give somebody the MVP, you would have to you watch their games and you're like, wow, he's doing everything for that team right now.
Yep, he certainly does. He carries a lot of weight for them.
Yeah. We got a few more we're going to cover, and then we'll head out. But Seattle, LA Rams, talked about that a little bit.
Well, as we've been talking, that one just popped up postponed.
That one is out now as well. Interesting. We do have New Orleans, Tampa Bay. We talked about this being interesting to me to probably take the 11. I'll be on a plane when that game's on, so I'll be entertaining myself by watching it on the. Hopefully, I'll have it on the plane. But New Orleans plus 11 against Tampa Bay. I'm going to say that's my pick. I'm going to make that as my. Since we're not going to do heavily conviction picks this week. I'm going to go with New Orleans plus the 11.
Plus the 11. Now, let me ask you a question. Doesn't it feel a little difficult to lay that much lumber on Tom Brady? And I'm wondering if it's causing us to shift our thoughts towards New Orleans.
Yeah, it seems too much.
Seems too much. Well, I think we both just figured out that it's going to be easier to bet on New Orleans than it is Tampa Bay.
Oh, for sure. I'd have a hard time. They're competitive. They're winning, right? They're 10-3, but they're not like blowing teams out. They're scoring a lot of points. But I'm not seeing. I just don't like. I think when you have a great coach like Peyton, and you have two great coaches here, Arians and Peyton, two of the best coaches in the last like 15 years. When you have a coach like Peyton, he's making this team, this New Orleans team right now with no real quarterback, and losing their quarterback, and they were going to go with their flex with the running quarterback, but having no quarterback, it really hurt this team. This team's probably a 9-win team right now, or an 8-win team if they don't have those quarterback injuries. So they've gotten really shelled, but they still managed to stay competitive because the coaching's so strong.
We have seen a few games out of New Orleans where they were pretty competitive defensively. And it's a divisional game, but I don't know. Never before have we seen such a competitive league.
Yeah, that's for sure. That would be my one conviction pick if I have it. Like the Minnesota-Chicago game is interesting. We talked about that, Uncle B. And we have the trend line, or where I'm headed towards in this game, is Chicago plus the points.
Home dog on a Monday night. I either have to play the home dog on a Monday night or sit on my hands. One of the two.
Does it impact you if like Minnesota's had like the 10 days of rest because they're coming off the Thursday game? It might. I think you need to watch. I think if you're going to bet this game specifically, like some of these games are clear. This is not an all clear game because there's a lot of COVID in the Chicago locker room. So take a look at that too before you bet this game. Right now, I'd have a tendency to want to take the Bears plus the 5.5 at home, but be very careful of what's going on with the COVID in that game.
Yeah, I think, they're hanging around 6. If we see that thing go to 7, that'll tell us quite a bit.
For sure. All right, anything else you want to leave with this week, Uncle B?
No, other than, we got some great college football games coming up in the national championship, and I will throw out that I have my eye on Mr. Harbaugh in Michigan as a big underdog outright winner play.
Yeah, I think what we might do next week, I'm going to be traveling on Sunday, but I think on Monday it might be great to hit a little bit of these college games because we're going to start this college bowl schedule. I don't know if there's anything that sticks out to you, but maybe we can grab a couple and do some intra-week shows and hit the college games that are coming up.
Yeah, we'll do a college bowl game show.
That sounds great. And do you do a college bowl pick? Is there anything in Vegas you can do where you can bet all the college games?
Well, there's a lot of different pools and office pools and those types of things. But one, if you're able to find it, that can be pretty fun and profitable is the confidence pick pool, where I believe there's 45 or 46 total bowl games. And so your most confident pick would have 46 points on it. And your least confident pick would have 1 point on it. And at the end, the person with the most points wins the pool.
That's pretty cool. I like that. So you're awarding based on laying the points. I've played in leagues like that before. That's kind of a fun way to do it.
Yeah. And then discipline and eliminate bad bowl games, especially teams that are going to a bowl game that they're not really interested in. Like if you find yourself in New Mexico in the Freedom Bowl or wherever they're playing there, and you thought that you had a chance to go to the Rose Bowl, probably not a real happy team down there in New Mexico.
One day we'll have the I Bet Network's bowl game.
Well, that would be fantastic. I'd love to.
We were already talking about golf tournaments, and we were talking about some other things, but that would be great. But hey, Uncle B, it's, as we talked about, it's going to be an interesting week, a tough week with the COVID issues, but also a tough week because some of these games and these lines are really interesting. So beware out there, wear your helmets, bettors, and we'll see you again next time on the Weekly Wager. Thanks, Uncle B.
Thank you. Take care.